All right, we now have an official quorum for this April 1st meeting of the Master Plan Working Group. My first order of business will be to a roll call for attendance. John Allen. I see his
Present.
face. There you go.
Present.
Thank you. Julie Capizello had notified me that she would not be able to make the meeting. Bob Carroll,
Bob Carroll's here.
Dorian DeFazio, Victoria Duckworth, Susan Duvall,
Here.
Lindsay Fox,
Here.
Anne Marie Foley,
Here.
Deborah George, Julie Grace notified me that she wouldn't be able to make it. Linda Hassinger also is not able to make it, although she said that she might be able to join. So if you see Bob's picture on there, that's the laptop waiting for Linda to be able to join the meeting whenever she can. Justin Hollander, Brian Houle,
Here.
Chantel Kimball,
Here.
Essek Petrie, David Robbins is present, Sue Robbins,
Here.
Colleen Roy,
Here.
and Roshan Otangi. Not present at the moment. Okay. What did I do with my agenda? There it is. So first agenda item will be to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, which were posted on the meeting materials on the website.
I move we approve the meeting minutes from March 4th, 2024.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the minutes of March 4th be approved as drafted. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Allen,
Approve.
Mr. Carroll,
Carroll's aye.
Ms. Duval,
Duval's aye.
Ms. Fox,
Aye.
Ms. Foley,
Aye.
Mr. Houle,
Aye.
Ms. Kimball,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye, Ms. Robbins,
Aye.
and Ms. Roy.
Aye.
Declare the motion carried unanimously. The minutes are approved. The next action item is to approve the quality of life findings, goals, and objectives. So with that, I'll ask Elena and or Sarah to walk us through that.
So
Yeah.
we, if it's, Sarah, do you want to start with quality of life?
Did you just get my message?
I just got your message, yes.
Yeah, if we could move the agenda items around and start with transportation and land use. My landlord is just coming through in a few minutes and I don't want to get cut off in the middle of it.
So if the committee is okay with that, we can start with the next item, the land use goals.
Without objection, let's do it. Let's not forget to get back to quality of life.
Thank you. Do you want to start with the text before transportation or the goals, Elena?
Be fine, since we have 4 topics to discuss and we want to make sure we have enough time for each ones. So we'll just get to the goals and talk about the goals and action items, because I'm assuming the committee had a chance to look at the findings. Thank you, Sarah. So we'll start with goal 1, which is getting at compact development and TOD. This is a topic that has been addressed in the bylaw for many years. Grafton has put a lot of energy and committee hours toward optimizing proximity to transit. And we want to continue that effort with the goals and acknowledge that effort and take it forward. So goal number 1 is direct new development toward the existing village districts and overlays zoned to accommodate a diverse range of housing opportunities, compact development, and a variety of transportation options. So in this case, dense development and transportation are intertwined. So this goal is trying to capture both this idea of proximity to transit, but also a way to direct multifamily development towards some of these nodes, these existing nodes. The first objective is encourage multifamily growth within the areas already established and voted upon by the residents to maintain consistency with what is brought to town meetings for land use goals. And we owe this point to Lindsay. The action items that relate to this objective are strengthen Grafton's multimodal connections to transit by directed multifamily development toward North Grafton Transit Village in particular, and the MBTA communities overlay districts. And the second is concentrate new development around existing traffic infrastructure to improve walkability. So Patak had comments around this idea of thinking of TOD development through this idea of walkability, and we certainly agree with that. This concept of last mile is integral to transit-oriented development, so it's not just about building these dense neighborhoods around transit. The goal is to provide a way to reach transit stops, to prevent having to drive to transit stops, which is a problem in a lot of bedroom communities. So we're trying to capture that here with this idea of walkability. The second objective under goal 1 is align zoning with economic development and housing goals that support development in Grafton's mixed-use village district. This is a conversation we've had in the housing element when we discuss goals for the housing element, but we're continuing this effort to upzone the current mixed-use village districts. So the first action item under that objective is upzone Grafton's village and neighborhood centers while maintaining housing forms that align with the community's small town character. So one thing that came out of our discussions in the workshop, if you recall, we had a visual survey. We got input from residents around what housing types would be desirable in Grafton. There's a desire to densify these nodes, especially the ones along commercial corridors. But there's also a sensitivity around what types and what scale and what kind of massing these new housing developments have in Grafton. So we want to be mindful of that and keep in mind the small town character that is valuable to residents. The next action item is use zoning incentives and density bonuses to encourage compact development in Grafton's village and neighborhood centers. And this relates primarily to making Grafton competitive in attracting developers and encouraging the type of dense development that would be good around these nodes / transit oriented development. The last objective is evaluate potential development sites in terms of their potential and suitability for housing, municipal, and recreational uses. And the action item is to identify targeted parcels and assess their potential for development by inventorying basically the current use, the building to land value ratio, the age of the structures, the ownership, and other characteristics, so that there is an inventory of what potential development sites might be. And I want to pause here and before I move on to goal 2, give the committee a chance to ask any questions or have any comments. George, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. We're talking about developers and it seems to be constantly relying upon them to come up with solutions for us. What about existing landowners that who could be incentivized to do something with their land versus a developer? Just an idea that maybe we haven't touched upon.
Yeah, thanks for that point. You know, whether it's a developer or a landowner, I think the coalition that would come together for housing, I'm thinking of housing, but commercial, that is equally valid here, would ultimately involve a developer who would have to close the funding gap somehow. And so to your point, we should absolutely involve property owners here too and target incentives of property owners as well. But we know they come together as a coalition and a developer is involved at some point.
Good point. I was just maybe referring to, you know, people in town that, you know, maybe aren't necessarily having that conversation with developers, but they may be just landowners with, you know, buildings on their land, but maybe their land would have excess capacity that could be developed with new rules and regulations put into place that would allow for that. Whereas right now, I believe we've got a 1 acre rule. And so being able to, and this would be in certain areas that would benefit the town, you know, South Grafton or some of the other areas that, you know, we have multi-unit housing already. So it would keep the character of the town the same.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point. And I know from neighboring towns, when the town has rezoned certain areas to have, let's say, multifamily by right, then property started to move and owners became interested in selling because land values increased in that process. So to your point, yes, that would be a useful conversation to have, especially I don't know if you had absentee landowners in mind, but that's another category that usually need either incentives or some form of penalties. Or owners that wait for anchor tenants and the properties deteriorate. That's not so much the case in Grafton, but regionally that's a problem as well. So thanks for that point.
Anne Marie, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just a question on upzone. Can you just tell me what that is or describe
Oh,
that?
sure. So upzone generally means densifying an area, whether that means infill development around a commercial corridor or creating higher density development around the transit villages. This is basically continuing an effort that has been at work for many years. And the zoning bylaw contains language. I don't believe they'll use the key word upzone in particular, but this idea of creating more mixed use development around the village centers and neighborhoods in Grafton. That's what that's getting at.
Okay, thank you.
Colleen?
I have 2 questions that are kind of the same. So looking at the screen now for action items, identify targeted parcels. Do we assign these action items to anyone or do we just hope somebody picks them up?
We will assign the action items to somebody. By the end of this effort, it is my hope that every action item will have someone who's going to take responsibility for following through on it, and that'll be part of our job is to identify. It's a big sort of a bugaboo in my head because of my recent work on the open space and rec plan, where we really didn't do that. So yeah, we're not at the point yet to nail that down, but that's certainly my intent by the end of this, that we will have every action item will have someone who's agreed to take responsibility for it and do it.
So that being said, can we scroll up to that first page we were looking at? Concentrate new development around existing traffic infrastructure and walkability. Like, how do you assign that? You know what I mean? Like, to me, that seems like more of a action wish than an action item, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, that is an example of something that we need to further flesh that out to turn, that's as it's stated to me, it's more of a goal or an objective. And somehow we have to translate it into something that somebody can actually do. I don't think we're there yet. I think it needs to be further fleshed out in order to turn it into something that's actually actionable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for that point. Typically tools such as creating by right pathways in the bylaw would be one way to concentrate development around an area. Also, some conservation is another way to concentrate development or turn it away from, so if preservation of land and preventing sprawl is a goal, then that's another way in which you could concentrate development around certain nodes. But to David's points, we could be more clear and more direct with how we want to respond. How could the bylaw be revised to incorporate something like that?
Yeah, that's kind of what I have in mind. Is I think we're still sort of early in our process. And again, this is, like I said, by the time we're done with this, I would like to see us have, a list of, a fairly focused list of action items, things that a particular town board or committee or department can do. It's described in a way that, yes, we can, we can do this, we can measure the progress, et cetera, et cetera. But I think right now we're probably going to be seeing some things like this that as written, they're a little bit more aspirational and more of an abstract idea. And then we'll want to find some way to nail it down in enough specifics so that we end up with something that will actually get us to where we want to go.
And, I wanted to add one more thing. John, I know you have your hand up and I want to make sure we hear your question as well. But in our conversations with Fiona, she did note that Grafton is in need for a zoning diagnostic. So in that process, there would be an opportunity to get very specific. Where would you want multifamily by right? Because that is definitely one way to concentrate development. So some things we could suggest them here, but really leave the details for a zoning diagnostic and a zoning review that would involve a different committee and the planning board and so on.
Right. Yeah, you to follow up on that one thought, and I don't want to forget John, who's been patiently waiting, but yeah, we're not going to spell out all of the results that we expect to see here. I mean, for example, if we undertake something like a zoning diagnostic, or we'll end up through several of these goals and objectives and action items, we're going to end up with some ideas for changing, for modifying zoning, for example, to create incentives and we're not going to solve all those problems as part of the master plan. We are going to identify what actions are going to be taken to solve those problems or make those changes. So, John?
Over the past few years, we've amended, changed our zoning to allow higher density, and we've also allowed mixed-use housing and developments. So we've done things to move in that direction. A couple of times Elena referred to incentives for landowners So I was wondering, other than zoning changes, what type of incentives does she have in mind?
I was primarily thinking of developers, but you know, since we talked about landowners, I think that that might be a worthy conversation to have. At the very least, create some sort of roundtable or dialogue between connecting landowners with developers. That's something the EDC could undertake, certainly. But in this text, I was primarily referring to developers.
Anything else on that, John?
No, it makes sense. I think we all struggle with the fact what we would like. However, without controlling the land, our hands are somewhat tied.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know what the answers are entirely, but I would like us to be able to explore other potential incentives. What more could the town offer in the way of incentives, whether it's, I'm not gonna, I don't know enough about what incentives are actually possible or feasible, but it's a topic that I think we definitely would like to explore. And like I said before, we're not going to come up with all the answers here as in our development of the master plan, but I think we're going to want to identify things to explore, and a broader concept of incentives might be one of those.
And John, you are correct. The town has engaged in an effort to zone and create overlays and create the transit village. So this has been going on for a while, and we're trying to capture that, and at the same time, we're trying to continue that effort with these goals.
Colleen has her hand up.
So I was just looking for some clarification on the objective right here, encouraging multifamily growth within the areas already established and voted upon by residents to maintain consistency with what is brought to town meeting for land use goals. So I guess I'm curious about this because a lot of developments don't necessarily go to town meeting. So this objective is unclear to me, and these are our land use goals. So I guess this seems, the wording on it is not jiving for me, and maybe I'm just, if somebody could explain it to me so I understand it better.
Yeah, certainly. So Lindsay made this suggestion, and we thought this is a good way to, I think, and Lizzie, please correct me, but the way we interpreted this is development, especially multifamily development, is always a tough sell to the public. It's contentious. So we're once again trying to work within the zoning overlays and the districts that have already been established and voted on.
Yes, that's it. That's what I was talking about, or just thinking about with the, the mixed use villages that we already have established, like as John brought up. We have those, those steps are kind of there, and, maybe kind of focusing on those areas. I know that Dave's brought up in the past that it hasn't gone as well as far as like promoting mixed use villages, but if the zoning is there, maybe, promoting the, new multifamily growth where, it's already kind of been established in our bylaws.
Is there a way we could word this to avoid suggesting that developments go up for town vote? Because that was definitely not the intent, but if that's the confusion, then we can certainly craft the wording here.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how to word it, but I think describing it in terms of the zoning that town meeting has already put in place. That seems to be the intent there is.
Mhm.
I just don't want anybody to ever point to this and say, this development can't happen because it goes against our master plan. And then say it was never brought to town meeting because our master plan indicates it should be brought to town meeting. I just feel like it leaves the availability for confusion, and I just wanted to eliminate that.
Yep. Thanks for flagging that.
Okay,
Um,
Amber, your hand is up.
I think John was ahead of me if you want to start with him.
That's just a leftover, it never came down.
Yeah, I just wrote in the chat. I mean, it's clear to me the intent, and you know, if you look at our master plan now, I guess, you know, there's never been any notion that developers would come to town meeting or particular developments would be voted on in town meeting. It's not indicated currently, and I don't feel like this indicates that, but that's, again, my opinion. And there's certainly never been an instance where someone has said no to something because of the wording in our master plan, because ideally, I think you make these things somewhat global enough that it encompasses a variety of thoughts and goals, I suppose.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, I'll move on to goal 2.
Chantel had her hand up for that discussion
sorry.
item.
I'm sorry, Chantel.
That's all right. I guess I did kind of want to circle back because I shared Colleen's concern when I first read this, it read more to me like we want to try to prevent developments from happening. It read a little, I know I'm not saying that well. But it read a little bit like we want to focus the multifamily in certain areas of town, make sure we keep the people who financially need that kind of housing in certain areas of town and away from other areas of town. And I don't know that necessarily read well to me in terms of some of our other goals.
Yeah, that I can see that how it could be read that way, and I think we really need to make a point here. To what end do we want to do that? We want to do that for better connectivity to transit, to make sure we protect open space and so on, though multifamily is not the problem with encroachment in open space. But yeah, I see your point. We should clarify this.
Does this goal need an objective? Because the goal makes sense plus action items. It's the objective that seems to be hanging up some people.
It you know, it's more or less the format where we're grouping certain action items under an objective. So it's more of an umbrella than anything. So this 3-tier goals are the format for the plan. If that was your question.
Well,
Does
the
it-
goal is the one above it. And that doesn't lead to any confusion for me, but the objective under that goal is where I start to get lost. And then the action items start bringing it back, but then even, you know, one action item, like Dave was saying, needs to get fleshed out more again. So that's all, or just to make it sure, like encourage multifamily growth. Boom, that's the objective.
Yeah, I think the point of this was to try to get into some specificity about what are we referring to. We're specifically referring to North Grafton Transit Village, to MBTA and so on. So what we were trying to direct the reader toward those specific overlays and districts that had been already established. But we'll rework the wording for this. Okay, moving on to goal 2, maintain the balance between the preservation of open space and the accommodation of new growth by encouraging development that is in harmony with the small town character that Grafton residents desire. First objective is protect town lands that have environmental or recreational value. And the action items are incentivize low impact development, work with the Grafton Land Trust to acquire, protect, and maintain land for open space, especially around Grafton's water bodies. Collaborate with organizations such as Quinsigamond and Blackstone River Watershed Association to explore opportunities to improve water bodies and resources. So preserving quality, preventing invasives, erosion, and so on. And I will also read goal 3 here, and we can have a conversation about both. Continue to review and update zoning regulations to align land use with the community's vision for the next 10 to 20 years. And specifically, action item calls for a comprehensive zoning diagnostic and update to ensure the zoning bylaws are current and in compliance with Mass General Law. And then the last action item, this is more about emerging issues in land use. This is getting at a regional issue, which is the large-scale battery energy storage for microgrid systems. So this has to do with solar fields. It may be a little bit too specific, but this is something that is starting to happen in every single town, and we anticipate Grafton will have to deal with this too.
Yeah.
And that is it for land use. If you have any questions or comments about goal 2
Yeah.
and 3.
Yeah, one last comment, and this really is kind of applies to land use in general, is that I don't think we should be fixated too much on, I don't think we should limit our consideration. You're kind of going back to the, the mixed use and all that, and the village centers and those neighborhood districts. I don't want to be too fixated on the existing zoning, the existing mixed use as expressed in the zoning bylaw. In the sense that we need to be willing to look at those districts, the mixed use districts in particular, are relatively small, and we may find it appropriate to to consider expanding the districts, and just sort of expanding our notion a little bit about what and where these mixed use districts are. I don't need to get into any more detail right here, but I just want to keep in mind that we don't want to be focused too narrowly on the existing mixed use districts. I think there are opportunities around those to sort of expand the concepts.
David, I wonder if one good way to capture what you're saying is, once again, to talk about the reason why we want connectivity and directing development towards certain areas, which is transit and transportation and
and also focusing on the term transit, to me, is a little bit of a mismatch with the reality of Grafton. We have two forms of transit in the town: the commuter rail, which is rather much more limited in usefulness compared to something like the T in Boston. It's not like a transit that people can use to do all their everyday. It's good for getting into Boston, and that's really about it. So it's rather more narrow than what the word transit generally brings to mind. And similarly, bus service. We do have a WRTA bus service in town, but it is extremely limited, and again, it's mainly useful for getting to and from the T station, the commuter rail station. So when the term transit to me means something a lot more than what Grafton has. Now we can we can sort of try to work on that as best we can, but we need to realize that it's not transit like you would get in the much closer to Boston, where you have the light rail, the trolleys, the subways, a bus system that can really get you all around. We don't have that in Grafton, so we need to keep that in mind when we think about transit-oriented development. Is that it's not in Grafton, it's not gonna be like it would be closer to Boston.
Maybe this is a good segue into our transportation conversation.
Yes, this is definitely part of a transportation conversation too.
But I want to make sure we hear Colleen, I'm sorry, Chantel's question and then Bob.
Yeah, maybe a little picky, but talking about encouraging development that is in harmony with the small town character that Grafton residents desire. That really seems to be the only, I wonder if that's better, said where we were talking about developments and whether that really belongs here where we seem to be talking more about preserving open space and recreational space. Maybe the emphasis here is just the balance. Maybe talking about footprint, if you want to talk about like development that with footprints that help us to maximize land use for conservation and recreation, but it just that note about small town character seems not to really relate as clearly to land preservation as it does maybe with those with the development in the prior goal 1.
That makes sense. Yeah, we can definitely move it to goal 1 and maybe add something here, some language about smart growth techniques such as cluster development, for example. That's directly protecting open space.
Yep, character to me says more like what houses look like
Yeah.
and the balance between the space.
Just to note, the land use topic covers several of the other topics in the master plan. It covers housing, covers economic development, it covers open space and recreation. Land use sort of is the combination of all of that. And so there's always going to be some question of, does this belong in this chapter or in the open space chapter or in the economic, et cetera, you know, just, it's kind of a broad topic. Anything else, Chantal?
That was it, thanks.
Bob, Carol?
Yeah, related to the point you were just making, David, where does agriculture fit in? Because we do have a little bit of agriculture and farming, right?
We do.
That, to me, that's not necessarily the same as open space, right?
Yeah, agriculture, arguably you could say agriculture is a bit of an economic thing because farms are, you know, it's a business that's been making money, hopefully, for the farmers. I guess agriculture doesn't really fit neatly into one of the other chapters of the master plan, so it's probably worth emphasizing as one of the important land uses in town is agriculture.
Right, and that kind of dovetails into the small town character and the history of Grafton, right?
We can definitely be more specific with action items and language around preserving chapter lands that is within the possibilities, or it is one of the mechanisms that a bylaw might use to address the question of agriculture.
So you would make that explicit?
Right.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I
adding-
mean, we kind of look at it, or the way this reads, at least to me, is, you know, either development or open space, right? And it's kind of like David pointed out. Farms operate for profit, some of them, right? And, you know, they kind of are a gray area that's not open space, nor is it developed.
Yeah, and you know, on that note, solar might be also another issue that directly pertains to agriculture, but again, a zoning diagnostic would definitely capture all of those topics.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. Anything else before we move on? All right, moving on to transportation then.
So the goals for the transportation are largely derived from the long-range transportation plan. They're broader and they get at issues related to safety, such as goal 1. So goal 1 is improve the safety of Grafton's road network for all users, especially on priority areas listed in this master plan. Improve the first objective is improve traffic calming measures and sightlines. And action items get at this range of measures through which Grafton can improve safety. Some of them involve partnering with Mass DOT and federal agencies. Some of them, such as the first action item, are within the town's purview, such as road and intersection improvements in either areas that have current issues or areas that anticipate high density and development, therefore high traffic. Improvement to speed management, supporting the Vision Zero initiative to reduce road fatalities. And the last action item is getting at parking around the common. This is something that came up in all of our conversations with residents, including the survey. So the action item is suggesting preparing a transportation study for the common to determine specific strategies for parking, safety, and transportation convenience. Moving on to goal 2, achieve a state of good repair.
Sorry, we might have some questions.
Sorry, John, go ahead. I'm sorry about that.
We've dealt with parking around the common for quite a while, and we decided the easiest way to deal with it, no parking requirements. So a lot of times before business goes in, you could require so many parking spots for that business. And as we kept on looking at it, there was no way to really allow businesses to grow around the common if we had parking requirements. So currently there is none. And the belief is that come July 4th, nobody's complaining about parking and there's tons of cars. Speaking more generally, the library tends to have more spaces than needed. So from our perspective, we've solved parking around the common to the extent possible, given the current infrastructure without huge, massive investments.
Yeah. Thanks for that point. Maybe we can add something here to the effect. So one thing that came out of conversations with business owners is the need to identify sites that could serve as parking around the common. So without really identifying parcels, I believe the parcels they had in mind are town-owned and school-owned, but I think that's probably something that remains unresolved in the common. And the parking requirements is a really important one. So thanks for highlighting that as being already something that was undertaken.
I mean,
Just let me comment to what you said. The select board did look at that building, the houses, the school supplies. And 1, we need the facility. And 2, the cost to convert it to parking was like outrageous, something like $300,000 a parking spot, which doesn't make sense given Grafton's tight budget.
Yeah, but I think I would suggest sort of, this is not real specific here, but I do think that that we need to take a larger look around the area of the common. It's not just parking. I mean, there is a pretty clear need for additional parking because aside from there are special events that occur. There's always going to be something like some of the concerts and so on that attract a large crowd over the summer, on Wednesday nights and whatever. But for businesses around the common to thrive, and for people to get more use out of the common, there does need to be, it would be helpful to have more parking. You know, as John noted, we eliminated a requirement for any specific business to have dedicated parking available. So we've kind of recognized some reality there, but it would be worthwhile to take a look, kind of a broader look at the common area to identify whether there are any realistic possibilities to accommodate more parking. There are also safety concerns. We have, it's a traffic problem in that area, and I don't know that there are any. There are probably no sort of magic bullets that can really make things dramatically better. But there again, I think there may be some possibilities for reconfiguring some of the roads around the common. Some people have suggested turning it into a rotary or a roundabout, but I doubt very much that that's practical. But there may be some things that can and should be done that maybe they turn out to be expensive, and it turns out we can't afford it. But we've been dancing around problems with traffic and parking at the common for many, many years. We're probably never going to really solve the problem, but we probably could take a look at it in somewhat perhaps more comprehensive than we've looked at it to date. And with that and some other problem areas for traffic, not clear that we can ever really solve the problems, but around the common in particular, I think we could do more to take a better look at it. And there's like 3 other hands up. I'm not sure who was first, but Brian's at the top of my list, my screen.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, just looking at the traffic calming kind of in quotes, and I agree with that, especially up around the common and, the 122, 140, our main street, basically, where we have no sidewalks. We have, pretty much a pretty wide road that people can speed down at any time and nothing to slow them down, other than one set of traffic lights, at Stop and Shop, and then the other end at Carroll and 122. But is there I guess, someone that would be a liaison? We talk about talking with the DOT. I mean, that could be a black hole if we don't have someone designated to really follow this through, and kind of be the lead on it. Is that something that is being considered, or is that too detailed for this plan?
Actually, that's quite important for the implementation plan. That's something that we should address in the implementation plan.
All right, that's my point.
And there's also, David is aware of this. We just got a DOTA grant approved. It's a small grant, but it gives Grafton a chance to participate along with 3 other towns into an implementation plan, the development of an implementation tool that helps with the lengthy implementation process of the master plan. It helps with transparency to the general public and also with bringing in responsible parties. So that was just a parenthesis. We have that in the works, but yes, we'll have to identify that in the implementation plan. Anne Marie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Dave said some of what I was going to say, but I would agree with leaving the that last action item as is. I think this is something that has come up when we were on the common when people were coming through our booth, giving us feedback, and additionally at the open session. And I would leave additional because there is the potential for additional parking. That plan, or it wasn't even a plan, but whatever may go on or could go on at the fire station, $300,000 per parking spot was nowhere near where that came out. That's actually certainly way off. And with potential new businesses even coming up sooner than later, going in there that would draw more people. I think it's just important for the folks who are running businesses there, as well as the patrons, that we are at least leaving this in here, and that we're at least saying that we're going to continue to look at this, right, as more and more people come in.
Yeah. And just to follow up on that particular topic, I'm not thinking specifically of one location. I'm thinking looking around the common area and looking for other opportunities. You know, yeah, people would like to park and just walk across the street, but the reality is you can't expect, you have to look farther afield from the common and look at, you know, where parking might be made available that gives people access to everything that's potentially around there. But yeah, but we talk about walkable neighborhoods. Yeah, and so when I hear someone saying people aren't going to walk, well, tough. You got to learn to walk if you want to do anything meaningful. So, you know, my idea of what I see is what I would like to see us look at around the common is not just local, but take a larger look around at what the opportunities might be in the larger area. Colleen.
So I mean, there are, like you said, Dave, there's going to be opportunities for additional parking in a lot of places. Like there's, you know, an apartment complex that's going to go in, that's going to bring in a lot of parking and additional parking for residents to use. But my specific thought on the common is the safety aspect. There are a lot of accidents and issues up there, but that also, because there's a state road involved, can we add something to action item 2 where we're partnering with Mass DOT and other state agencies, specifically dangerous intersections, specifically the common? That way we have a dual focus on that, because the bottom action item to me is coming really across as heavily parking focused, but safety for me is the bigger concern. And I don't want to add parking spots in an area that could potentially be used to help reconfigure the traffic, right? And we can potentially get a better traffic flow around the common, make everything much safer. I would hate to see it go to parking first. You know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you for that point. And I wanted to circle back to the question, or George's question earlier about the liaison, and call attention to Sarah's comment. So the CMRPC's transportation department does serve as a point of contact and liaison with Mass DOT, for example, or federal agencies. So we can move on to goal 2. This one is pretty straightforward. Achieve a state of good repair. Repair and maintain roads to increase miles of pavement in good condition. Repair and maintain sidewalks to increase miles of sidewalks. And increase accessibilities in the form of the number of ADA ramps in good condition. And increase miles of bicycle lanes or roads available for cyclists. Moving on to goal 3. Encourage multimodal transportation to reduce congestion and improve quality of life. This is also getting at some of the key findings we included here, which is, you know, attracting a younger demographic. 24 to 54 is the demographic that seems to use public transit the most. So this is, you know, one of those goals that is interconnected with housing, with economic development, and demographics. First objective is partner with the WRTA to improve public bus service. And the action items include increased ridership through targeted marketing or awareness about ridership, increase paratransit services such as the Council on Aging Elder Bus, increase routes and frequency of WRTA bus routes in Grafton, partner with MBTA, the next objective, I'm sorry, is partner with MBTA to improve commuter rail service, increase ridership through targeted marketing of the train schedule. Next objective is improve first and last mile connectivity to public transit options and destination, which is, particularly important one. Increase miles of sidewalks for pedestrians, construct new sidewalks to standards that are accommodating for all pedestrians, including those with mobility challenges and visual impairments. Carry out Grafton's Complete Streets Plan. And I wanted to note here that this was one of the takeaways from our second workshop. Sidewalks were a big focus, and residents were very responsive to not only this idea of adding more sidewalks, but they helped us locate some of the areas that are particularly in need. Increase regional trail access, connect to Blackstone Valley Rail Trail through South Grafton, and explore additional trail potentials with the trail committee. And we can go through goal 4 again in the interest of time, and then maybe after that we can take questions and have a conversation. So goal 4 is employ emerging transportation technologies and sustainability measure. First objective is mitigate groundwater contamination through stormwater management. So this includes culvert infrastructure. So bringing that to compliance with NWACC protocol and scoring system. Deploy nature-based solutions to reduce stormwater runoff. So that may range from having more pervious surfaces to bioswales and other measures around parking lots. The next action item is consider a regular street sweeping program. Achieve the state goals of reaching net zero in 2050. Prepare for phasing out gas-powered vehicles. Identify locations for additional electric vehicles charging and public property. And partner with electric providers to ensure the grid is prepared for the influx of electric vehicle charging. And the last action item is support the rideshare programs. And that's all we have for transportation. If you have any questions or comments.
Brian?
Yeah, so when I was looking through the key findings that you sent me, Dave, a couple of things popped out for me. That was what we talked about here, kind of generally, that we have some ideas where we have some problem streets, if you will, problem intersections. Pleasant Street was mentioned, which I entirely agree with. That intersection is very, very difficult. But I'm not seeing Carroll Road looked at. It seems to be overlooked, and that is the main throughway to get to the MTA station for the commuter rail. I think if we did a traffic study, it'd be hundreds of cars in the morning and at night that fly through there on that road, and to get to the commuter rail and back again. So it's a very dangerous area if you want to do any kind of walking or bicycling on Carroll Road. And Carroll Road is also within 1 mile of the high school. So there's a lot of children that actually walk Carroll Road to get to school, which I find that overlooking that, now we're looking at, some kids that possibly, and also the middle school, by the way, would be maybe impacted by this type of thing. So I just want to bring that up because that was not mentioned in the key findings. But I think it needs to be added. I know it's not exactly part of what we're talking here, because this is the general overview, but the key findings, I think it needs to take front center stage as well as a problem area. And that's pretty much it. I would also encourage if we could enhance the idea of having the e-bikes, which we've mentioned a number of times, possibly incentives to make those a bit more, once we work on the infrastructure to get that in place, make those more of a mode of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Colleen.
The action item, explore additional trail potential with the Trails Committee, seems redundant to me. We have a Trails Committee that's already charged with that, so that's who that action item would go to, and they're already charged with doing it, so I just don't feel like we need to have it in the master plan.
There are probably a number of actions that may be worth mentioning in the master plan, even though they are in some cases actions that are already being undertaken. If nothing else, if it's worth, it might be worth, and this may or may not be one of them, but there are a number of actions that we cover, or objectives that we cover that are things we're already doing, but it's worth emphasizing sort of the need to continue doing it, or maybe a need to expand upon it.
Yeah, seeing how it's already covered in the open space and rec plan and it exists, it just seems pretty redundant for this particular item.
Yeah, maybe this is something we should tackle in the open space topic.
Yeah, I mean, we do have multiple plans, and there's a lot of overlap. I mean, we've got a whole chapter of the master plan here on open space, and we've got an open space and rec plan, which we completed just 4 years ago. And a lot of that can carry into this. I mean, it's just sort of, the master plan is trying to pull a lot of stuff together into one plan. But yeah, and we do need to, in the master plan, we do need to recognize things that are important to be done and that maybe someone else is already doing, that still might be worth, in generally speaking, worth mentioning. I don't want to, it's already after 8 o'clock, so I'm going to try to move on. Brian, your hand is still up. Chantel? I think Chantel is on mute.
Sorry, I was muted. You're right. I actually had the question on that same item only because I wasn't sure how it related to transportation specifically. But because it felt like it really belonged with either recreation or open space. The rail trail made more sense to me because that's bike transit and could conceivably be used for transportation. But I wasn't sure if there was something I was missing with that additional action item. But I would certainly want to see it stay, just not necessarily in this goal.
And Anne Marie.
Yeah, I don't really mind where it goes, but I would want to see this stay for sure, because in a master plan, what we're trying to think about is, 10, 15 years down the road, where some or many of us may not be involved. A trails committee may or may not have, faltered and whatnot. So to make sure that this is something that is identified for people down the road. We've just started it, and yes, it's being, things are happening right now, but we want to make sure that we're looking at how we want people in the future to see what our vision was, now. So agree with Chantel, you can put it wherever, but I would want to make sure that this remains somewhere.
Thank you. And if there are no other comments, maybe we can move on to quality of life, just to make sure we stay on track.
Absolutely. Since we've run through these before, are there any points specifically that people would like to speak through before we wrap up the quality of life chapter goals?
Yeah, we had talked some about the quality of life goals and objectives at our last meeting. This is, I mean, since the last meeting, various members of the committee have contributed their suggestions for filling out and completing the goals and objectives. So that's really where we're at now is, you know, let's look at the goals, objectives, and action items that we have listed here, and what if anything would we like to change or add?
Mhm. Brian?
Okay, I'm looking at the key findings here. I'm not sure, when we talk about the key findings, we talk about childcare and so forth, if we brought this up as part of the solution, which is pre-K, or approving more facilities to do childcare in town. In other words, Mrs. Smith wants to be a childcare or daycare center, for half a dozen kids, that type of thing. And if you're in, a situation where you don't have a lot of money, you need an inexpensive solution. And I think that probably might even be something that we could partner with the state on. I'm not sure exactly what they've got going on, but that whole idea of, lifting up people that have, low income. The biggest thing they have is childcare. And, so, if that's a specific item on this quality of life findings, should we specify what we're talking about? And that includes healthcare as well. We obviously have state healthcare, but are we open to allowing small, professional buildings in areas that are that would allow for doctors and so forth? In terms of the zoning, I don't know. That would be closer to those, people that need them.
Right.
So, and yeah, that's pretty much the two areas that I wanted to talk about. And I mean, lobbying for, state income tax reductions for, for those people in need, and adjusting the taxes accordingly. But that may be beyond what we need to do here. So that's it.
Thank you.
Anne Marie, your hand is up.
Yeah, sorry, I asked in the chat because I was trying to avoid this, but I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I apologize. So the townwide communications director, is that like a paid position? You guys probably already talked about this, but just to give me a general gist on that. Is that a new paid position?
We've received comments about making it a paid position. I think that would certainly be above the purview of this master plan, whether it's a part-time volunteer or paid position. Colleen, did you have something to add?
Yeah, when William Blake first came to Grafton, that was his title. He was a management analyst and communication specialist. So that is a position we have had in Grafton before. So maybe we're to as reestablish that position. Currently, it's not being funded, but it is a position we've had here in Grafton recently.
Sue?
I just wanted to ask, how is it the town's responsibility to reinvigorate local journalism? I don't know how the town's responsible for doing that.
For the
Sure if it belongs there, since journalism the town is involved with communicating to the public, but we aren't to set up newspaper agency.
Mhm. Yeah. It could be, not to put this on John Allen, something the EDC could establish more of a volunteer board position. But we could rethink this if it's out of the purview of the master plan.
Yeah, I think, just to build on Sue's comment there, that's when I was looking at all the things that you could consider under the topic of quality of life, there's a fair amount of that is simply not something that the town can control, that the town can do. And ultimately this master plan is, is to express what the town of Grafton can and should do going forward to, to achieve our long-term goals here. And there's a lot of things that we would like to see happen, but the town can't make them happen. The town can't create, uh, you know, identify any particular business that you think would be important. The town can't make that happen. The town, in some cases, for some things that the town itself cannot do, the town can incentivize, the town can take some actions to incentivize things. But local journalism is a specific example. I can't even imagine anything the town could do to reinvigorate local journalism. And we have to kind of look at all of these things, not just, maybe more so in the quality of life topic here than some others, but we have to be thinking in terms of actions that the town can take to move towards achieving these goals.
I know a lot of people have their hand up, but since we're talking about this, I just wanted to note in Spencer, the cable access staff have this is a very small effort, but it seems to be effective. It's called the Spencer Journal. It was just launched by cable access staffs, and it's a way to sort of pivot for cable access to pivot into a new direction. And the Spencer Journal is primarily publicized through social media, and it seems to gain more and more popularity. And it's simply very, very small events, small news from the town, library events and such. But that seems to me pretty much the only way I've seen this done. And it's right next door. But point well taken, this is a little bit outside of the purview of what the town can do.
All right, Chantal?
Perhaps it would happen through some of the other communication efforts, but maybe it's just the verb choice of reinvigorate, that's kind of problematic. What about like making refreshing the town's relationships with local journalism, or getting more up to date on what's out there and who's actually publishing and communicating regularly? For example, I know we've relied very heavily on the Grafton News, which seems pretty quiet right now, but I feel like the Community Advocate has been a little bit more active and putting more articles out there. So maybe it's more about just that relationship with local news agencies, as opposed to like, this sounds like we're trying to revive a lost industry.
House support.
Or partner with,
Yep.
or identify partners or something, more.
Anything else, Chantal?
That was it, thanks.
Anne Marie?
Yeah, I was gonna say something like similarly, maybe it was the wording that was wrong there, like facilitate relationships with local news outlets. And then to someone else's point, sorry, whoever was just mentioning the cable access, or this could be in the form of a newsletter, right? It doesn't have to be papers per se. So journalism as it relates to a number of different venues.
Yeah, for sure. Or even Grafton Community Television.
We did have a show once. It was called Twig.
Any other pressure points for the quality of life goals? I think the biggest thing that changed from last month is in this goal 3, we added a bit more on some of these categories. Started as housed and fed, and we added a little bit of public health in here as well. So this first objective, community services, is the biggest change since we saw quality of life last month. And then we still have these objectives for food, housing, and refugee and immigrant populations. But if there's no other comments for quality of life, perhaps we can move on.
Anything else anybody has on this?
Hey, Brian.
I just want to mention one thing. I know we talked about the WRTA, and, making sure that we have enough runs, so forth, into Grafton. That really requires a point man that's political. I mean, that's, to get, that service is gonna require a lot of effort. And, I just remember being in, West Springfield trying to get the local Springfield Regional Transit to come to Agawam on more occasions and more stops and more times. And it was quite an effort to try to make that happen. And I don't think we were that successful at it, even with a lot of people going at it and trying hard. So the WRTA I think it's going to require a high level interaction, that with someone that can speak with them on an equal level, if you will. So I don't know if that's part of it.
That gets to ultimately assigning responsibility for, the relevant action items there that.
Okay,
That if an action item is to expand the WRTA service, someone has to take responsibility for that, and that's got to be someone who is in a position to at least try to make that happen. The kind of person you're talking about, Brian. Yeah, it's one thing to say we want to do this. It's another thing to find the way to go about making it happen, and that's going to be a heavy lift.
it is, yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks,
because
Dave.
the WRTA service we have exists that in Grafton currently. It's one route that basically runs from Walmart and Northbridge up to the commuter rail station. It runs about once an hour in mornings and afternoons on weekdays, and doesn't connect to anything else really. Not to get too much into the weeds on it, but that route connects at the Cumbies in South Grafton, connects to another route that goes over to the shops at Blackstone Valley. From there, you can connect to buses going into Worcester. But it's just not something that a lot of people are going to find useful for general transit purposes. And there's, I don't know all the reason, all the details that will go into actually successfully expanding that service, but we can have that as a goal, but it may take a while to accomplish it.
Right.
Anything else on quality of life, anybody?
Awesome. Thank you.
And did we also had a government service or town services piece here? Do we want to cover that tonight, or we want to, put that off to next meeting?
And perhaps looking at the time, we could have participants email in any suggestions you have for town services, as well as our next chapters before our May meeting, if that's all right with the committee.
We'll be sending, just like we did for these topics, we'll send to the committee key findings for natural and cultural resources and open space, and a sample or example goal, and then we'll also take suggestions to bring to the next meeting.
Colleen?
So my only question was the documents that were posted on the town website for tonight looked a little different than what I was seeing shared. Forgive me if it's in the Google Drive. I'm not great at Google Drive, so if it was there, I missed it. But the documents that get shared on the town website, that's what we should be reviewing, or?
Colleen, I believe this was part of the documents. But this is collecting all the input from all the committee members. I wonder what accounts for that difference, because this should be the same. It was one of several documents, so maybe you were looking at committee member input.
Yeah, there was one of the documents posted to the website, and it was, if you look at the meeting agenda web page, there's a link to it. The link to the document that we were looking at tonight was, oh, let me see. Which one was it? Yeah, it's the one that's labeled Draft Goals Elena Ion. And I think that's the one that was on the screen tonight. And there's actually more there than we looked at tonight, because the latter part of the document also included some of the working group materials that were submitted into it. So with that, we're going to cover town services, open space and recreation, natural and cultural resources at the next meeting, correct? So anybody have anything else to talk about this evening? And again, I would like to reemphasize that all of this is subject to change as we get more into the details. You know, we may, as we work out some of the details of the action items and everything else, we may find that, you know, we might want to describe some of the goals and objectives a little bit differently. But, you know, this is where we are now and what we have to work with going forward. So if there's nothing else, I guess the chair here would recognize a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Mr. Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Carroll,
Carol's eye.
Ms. Duval,
Aye.
Ms. Fox,
Aye.
Ms. Foley,
Aye.
Ms. George,
Aye.
Mr. Hool,
Aye.
Ms. Kimball,
Aye, sorry.
Mr. Robbins votes aye, Ms. Robbins,
Aye.
and Ms. Roy.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.